This project is building on the work that the Midlands Conservation Partnership has been doing in the region for the last 12 years or so. What we do is that we work with landowners in the region to protect lowland native grasslands of Tasmania, which is a critically endangered community. And we enter a contract with these landowners for them to manage areas of native grasslands for conservation as well as production. Whereas the landowners meet a certain number of key performance indicators every year, they receive a stewardship payment and as well as some support from us to manage these areas for conservation. Before European arrival, these are areas that were burned quite regularly by the Tasmanian Aboriginal people. And then, of course, with European arrival, that land management changed. Grasslands are an ecosystem that needs some sort of disturbance. If it's left unmanaged, a lot of these acacias and this wattle that we see here would little by little encroach on the grassland. And of course, they would then transition from a grassland to a woodland and ultimately a forest.
There are a range of different native grasslands in Tasmania, in the lowlands of Tasmania, but the two major ones that we have are the kangaroo grasslands and the silver tussock grasslands. So we tend to get kangaroo grass areas up on the slope, but also in very fertile soils as well. So things like basalt soils and the classic dolerite soils that we get a lot in the Midlands. They'll dominate those sort of areas. Where we see the silver tussock grasslands is generally along the flats on the alluvial soils and close to creek lines and rivers and things like that. The lowland native grasslands are critically endangered under the federal government's legislation. That's the highest threat level that there is. It means basically that there's less than 10% of the original extent left. Probably the two major threats these days are overgrazing and weeds. So it can be shrubby species like gorse and boxthorn, which often get into these areas. But we've also got now a lot of invasive grasses coming in as well, which displace those native species.
NRM North will be working with private landholders in the Midlands to undertake ecological burning of the grasslands, funding weed control in high threat areas, fencing for stock management and revegetating areas adjacent to woodlands as well. The project's jointly funded by the Australian Government under the Saving Native Species and Natural Heritage Trust projects.
This conservation will enable us to help manage the different landscapes that are within our farm. We're hoping to see some benefits. If we can manage our landscape better and increase the diversity in the ground cover, we're hoping to see benefits in animal health across the board. It helps us to tell the story of our farm and that flows on to the products that we sell. So say particularly for brands that are operating in the Europe market, they want to tell their consumers what's going on at a farm level.
A majority of our grasslands in Tasmania are located in the Midlands hotspot, which is where this project is focused, and a majority of them actually aren't protected, so our grasslands are often overlooked as just clear spaces with no natural value.